You are outnumbered 2-1. Your army is exhausted, demoralized, fresh from a humiliating defeat. Your enemies, confident and massive, are preparing to deliver the final, killing blow. Your kingdom, your legacy, everything you've built hangs by a single, frayed thread. This is not a hypothetical scenario. This was the reality for King Frederick the Great of Prussia in December of 1757. What he did next, on the frozen fields near a forgotten Silesian village called Leuthen, wasn't just a battle. It was a masterpiece of military genius so profound that a century later, Napoleon Bonaparte himself would study it and declare it a perfect work of art. This is the story of how a king, with nothing left to lose, tricked an entire army and forged a superpower in a single day.
To understand the miracle of Leuthen, you first have to understand the disaster that came before it. Just 2 weeks earlier, the main Prussian army under the Duke of Brunswick-Bevern had been crushed at the Battle of Breslau. The fortress city, the capital of the rich province of Silesia, had fallen. The Prussians lost nearly 10,000 men, and the survivors were in full, panicked retreat. The Austrian commander, Prince Charles of Lorraine, was riding a wave of victory. He commanded a colossal army, now swollen to over 66,000 men, and he held all the cards. All he had to do was wait out the winter, consolidate his gains, and Prussia would effectively be knocked out of the 7 Years' War. For Prussia, the loss of Silesia wasn't just a tactical defeat, it was an existential threat. The province was rich in resources and manpower, the jewel in Prussia's crown. Losing it meant relegation to a second-rate power, a mere puppet for the great empires surrounding it. The news reached Frederick, and he knew that inaction meant death.
Frederick raced to join the remnants of his shattered army. He gathered them at a small town called Parchwitz. What he found was a force of barely 33,000 men. They were cold, hungry, and their spirit was broken. Many expected to be told to retreat, to save what was left of the army for the spring. Frederick had other ideas. On December 4th, he summoned his generals and officers. He didn't shout, he didn't threaten. He spoke to them with a brutal, chilling honesty. He laid out the situation plainly. They would attack the vastly superior Austrian army wherever they found it. He said, "I should think I had done nothing if I left the Austrians in possession of Silesia." He told them that any regiment that hesitated would lose its colors and its swords. He concluded with a line that would become legend. "The gentleman who does not feel himself courageous enough can have his discharge this very day and go home." Not a single man moved. In that moment, Frederick transformed a defeated mob back into the formidable Prussian army. He had given them a choice, victory or a glorious death. They chose victory. Who was this man who could command such loyalty? Frederick II was a paradox. He was a philosopher king, a composer, a correspondent with the great minds of the Enlightenment like Voltaire. But he was also a ruthless military strategist, forged in the crucible of war. His father had beaten him, tried to crush his artistic spirit, and created in his place a monarch with an iron will. Frederick understood war not just as a clash of numbers, but as a contest of wills. He knew his soldiers intimately. He knew their strengths, their fears, and most importantly, he knew the absolute unwavering discipline that had been drilled into them. He also knew his enemy. He knew Prince Charles of Lorraine was a capable but conventional commander, a man who followed the textbook. Frederick never wrote a textbook. He wrote masterpieces. The day after his speech, Frederick's army marched. It was an army reborn. They covered an astonishing 17 miles in a single day,
in the biting cold of a Central European winter. Their destination was the Austrian army, which had taken up a defensive position west of Breslau, near the village of Leuthen. As they marched, Frederick's vanguard, under the command of the brilliant cavalry general Hans Joachim von Zieten, made contact with the Austrians at the town of Born. It was a sharp, brutal skirmish. The Prussians quickly overwhelmed the Austrian defenders, but this wasn't just about winning a small fight. It was about intelligence. Frederick captured Austrian officers, interrogated prisoners, and personally scouted the terrain. He was building a mental map of his enemy's position, and more importantly, their mindset. The news of the Prussian advance reached the Austrian camp. Prince Charles held a council of war. His generals were almost universally dismissive of the threat. The Prussians were a beaten force. This was surely just a desperate, foolish gesture by a mad king. Why hide behind fortifications? They decided to move out of their strong defensive positions around Breslau and meet Frederick on open ground. They would deploy their massive army in a traditional linear formation nearly 4 miles long and simply crush the smaller Prussian force with sheer weight of numbers. It was a decision born of arrogance, and it would prove to be a catastrophic mistake. They were playing checkers, while Frederick was preparing to play chess. On the morning of December 5th, 1757, the two armies faced each other. A thick mist hung over the frozen fields. The Austrians were deployed exactly as expected, a massive wall of infantry and cavalry stretching from the village of Nippern in the north to Sogschutz in the south. Their right flank was anchored by marshy ground, their left by the village. It looked like an impregnable position. But Frederick, through his reconnaissance, knew something the Austrians had overlooked. He knew the terrain. Specifically, he knew about a series of low, rolling hills, the Schleierberg, that ran parallel to the Austrian line. These hills were just high enough to be a perfect screen. An army could march behind them, completely hidden from an observer on the Austrian side. This geographical feature would be the key to everything. The battle began. Frederick launched his first move, a classic feint. He sent a small portion of his cavalry and some infantry to make a noisy, aggressive attack on the Austrian right flank, the very northern end of their line. It was a convincing performance. The Prussians advanced, their cannons roared, and they appeared to be making a full-scale assault. Prince Charles and his staff saw exactly what they expected to see, a desperate frontal attack. They fell for the bait completely. Prince Charles ordered his reserves, including his best cavalry, to move from his center and left all the way over to his right flank to crush this supposed attack. He was weakening the majority of his line to reinforce a point that was never the true target. The first part of Frederick's plan had worked to perfection. Now for the masterstroke. While the Austrians were distracted by the noisy demonstration on their right, Frederick gave a quiet order to the main body of his army. The entire force, over 25,000 men, turned sharply to the right and began to march south. They moved with incredible speed and in near-perfect silence, and as they marched, they slipped behind the screen of the Schleierberg Hills. From the Austrian point of view, it was bewildering. One moment, the main Prussian army was in front of them. The next, obscured by the morning mist and the terrain, they had simply vanished. The Austrian generals were confused. Had they retreated? Were they repositioning? They had no idea that at that very moment, the entire Prussian army was marching completely undetected along the length of their own line. What Frederick was doing was executing his signature tactic, the oblique order of battle. It sounds complex, but the idea is brutally simple. Instead of attacking the enemy's entire line at once, you refuse to engage with most of it. You pull back one of your own flanks while massively strengthening the other. Then you march that strengthened flank around the enemy's side and smash into the very end of their line. It's like using a hammer to shatter one single link in a long chain. If you can break that first link with overwhelming, concentrated force, you can then roll up the rest of the enemy line, piece by piece, before they even have time to react. It requires incredible timing, perfect discipline, and a commander who knows the terrain blindfolded. At Leuthen, all three conditions were met.
The Austrian left flank was held by troops from Württemberg. They believed the battle was happening miles away to their right. They were at ease. Many had even stacked their muskets. Then the ground began to tremble. Out of the mist, not in front of them, but directly to their flank, the entire Prussian army emerged. It must have been a terrifying sight. Tens of thousands of infantry advancing in perfect, unwavering lines, like a blue tide rising out of the earth. The Prussian artillery, which had moved with the infantry, unlimbered and opened a devastating cannonade at point-blank range. Before the Württembergers could even properly form a line of battle, the first wave of Prussian grenadiers was upon them, bayonets first.
The assault was overwhelming. The Prussian infantry had been trained to fire faster and advance more steadily than any other army in Europe. They fired disciplined volleys that tore huge holes in the hastily formed Austrian ranks. Then they charged. The Württemberg regiments, hit from the flank by an enemy they didn't even know was there, didn't stand a chance. They broke and fled, spreading panic through the units positioned behind them. The first link in the Austrian chain had been shattered. Now Frederick began to roll up the line. As each new Austrian unit tried to turn and face the threat, they were hit in their own flank by the relentless Prussian advance. It was a cascade of destruction.
Prince Charles, finally realizing the true nature of the disaster unfolding on his left, desperately tried to form a new line. He frantically ordered troops from his now useless right flank to march south. But it was too little, too late. The battle seemed to be a foregone conclusion, but the Austrians had one last card to play. The Austrian cavalry commander on the left, General Lucchesi, saw an opportunity. As the Prussian infantry advanced, their own flank was becoming exposed. Lucchesi gathered over 70 squadrons of heavy cavalry, thousands of horsemen, and launched a massive charge aimed directly at the side of the Prussian infantry line. If this charge hit home, it could shatter the Prussian attack and turn the tide of the entire battle.
But Frederick was a step ahead. He had anticipated this very move. He had held his own cavalry, 40 squadrons under General von Driessen, in reserve, hidden behind another small rise in the ground. Just as Lucchesi's cavalry was building momentum for their charge, Driessen unleashed his own horsemen. They didn't meet the Austrian charge head-on, they slammed into its flank. The result was catastrophic for the Austrians. Their charge was thrown into chaos. What should have been a battle-winning maneuver turned into a confused, swirling melee. The elite Prussian cavalry, better trained and better led, cut through the disorganized Austrians. General Lucchesi was killed, and his cavalry was broken and scattered. The last major Austrian threat had been eliminated.
With the cavalry threat gone, the Prussian infantry resumed its inexorable advance. This was the image that would burn itself into the memory of European warfare. The Prussian infantry battalion, a perfectly drilled machine of flesh and steel, advancing under fire, stopping to deliver a devastating volley, then advancing again. They didn't just defeat the Austrian units in front of them, they systematically dismantled the entire Austrian army, one section at a time.
The Austrian line, which had started as a proud 4-mile-long front, was now bent back on itself, a confused and panicked rabble trying to form a defensive line centered on the main village of Leuthen. Leuthen village became the scene of the battle's most desperate and bloody fighting. The Austrians packed into the town, using its stone houses and garden walls as fortifications. They knew this was their last chance to hold. Frederick, seeing the advance stall, brought up his heavy artillery. The massive cannons began to blast the village, smashing buildings and tearing through the packed ranks of defenders. Then the infantry went in. It was savage, street-to-street combat. The focal point of the defense became the village church, a sturdy stone building surrounded by a high wall. The Austrian grenadiers who held the churchyard fought with incredible bravery, repelling multiple Prussian assaults. Seeing his men falter, Frederick took personal command. He rode to the front, rallying his personal guard, the elite infantry regiment No. 15. Under the eye of their king, they fixed bayonets and stormed the churchyard wall. It was the final, decisive act of the battle. After a brutal fight, the Prussians broke through the defenses. The fall of the churchyard broke the back of the Austrian resistance. The will of the Austrian army was finally completely shattered. What began as a retreat turned into a full-blown rout. As darkness fell, the Austrian army ceased to exist as a coherent fighting force. It was every man for himself. They fled in terror back towards the bridges of Breslau, abandoning cannons, supply wagons, and thousands of their comrades. The Prussian pursuit was relentless. Throughout the cold night, Zieten's hussars hunted down the fleeing remnants, capturing thousands of prisoners. The scale of the victory was almost unbelievable. Frederick had lost around 6,000 men. The Austrians had lost over 22,000, including more than 12,000 taken prisoner. 51 flags and 116 cannons were captured. An army of 66,000 had been utterly annihilated by an army of 33,000. There's a famous story from the night after the battle. Frederick, seeking shelter, was directed to the chateau of Leuthen, only to be told it was full of Austrian officers. He rode on until he found a small cottage. Inside, he found a group of his generals, the architects of his great victory, passed out asleep on a floor covered in straw, too exhausted to move. He looked down at them and said softly, "I have troubled you a great deal today, gentlemen. You deserve to rest. Good night." It's a moment that reveals the human side of the Iron King and the profound exhaustion that follows even the most glorious of victories. He understood the price his men had paid. The Battle of Leuthen had immediate, decisive consequences. The remnants of Prince Charles's army were trapped in Breslau. A few days later, the entire garrison of 17,000 men surrendered to Frederick. In a single campaign, lasting less than 3 weeks, Frederick had not only saved his army from annihilation, but had completely destroyed the Austrian force and reclaimed all of Silesia. Prince Charles of Lorraine was relieved of his command in disgrace. The news of the victory sent shockwaves across Europe. In London, Frederick's allies, the British, celebrated. In Paris, Vienna, and St. Petersburg, the courts were stunned into disbelief. How could this have happened? The legacy of Leuthen is immense. It is considered by many military historians to be the single greatest tactical victory of the modern age. It cemented Frederick the Great's reputation as a military genius of the highest order. Military theorists like Clausewitz would study it for generations. Staff colleges around the world still use it as a perfect example of the principles of mass, surprise, and deception. And of course, there is Napoleon's famous assessment. When asked what he thought of the battle, he called it a masterpiece of movement, maneuvers, and resolution, which alone is sufficient to immortalize Frederick and rank him among the greatest generals.
So why was it so successful? It boils down to a perfect storm of factors. First, intelligence and terrain. Frederick knew the battlefield better than his opponent and used a seemingly insignificant range of hills to hide his entire army. Second, deception. The feint against the Austrian right flank was perfectly executed, causing them to fatally weaken the actual point of attack. And third, and perhaps most important, was discipline. The ability of the Prussian infantry to march in perfect formation, in silence, and then attack with relentless ferocity was the engine that drove the entire plan. Without that discipline, the Oblique order would have been an impossible dream. Leuthen was the ultimate triumph of quality over quantity, of a superior mind and a superior military instrument over a larger, more conventional foe.
The Battle of Leuthen did more than just save Silesia. It saved Prussia. It ensured the kingdom would survive the 7 Years' War and emerge as a recognized great power in Europe. This small, sandy kingdom in northern Germany, through the will of its king and the discipline of its army, had proven it could stand against the giants and win. The road from Leuthen leads directly to the unification of Germany in the 19th century and the shaping of the modern world. It was all made possible by what happened on that one cold December day when a king facing certain doom chose not to retreat but to attack, and in doing so conducted a perfect battle. The impossible victories are the ones that echo through history. Let us know in the comments which legendary battle you'd like to see us break down next. And if you enjoy deep dives into military genius, make sure to subscribe for more.